So I'd like to talk a little bit about NAD, and I'd like to just talk a little bit about my perspective of it. So, as I said, I'm a physician. I've been involved with this molecule since 1979. I guess I'm aging myself a little bit. And the derivative of the word doctor comes from Latin, docere, meaning to teach. So there is the concept of a physician, the Greek derivative, a physically to treat, and the Latin version to teach. So I think the most important thing that a doctor can teach is a different paradigm for decision making. So what I'd like for you to do today is to come away maybe with a radical transformation in asking what exactly should I do for my longevity and having a different paradigm on how to answer that. Because we're all being bombarded with different things to buy and do for our own treatment, and it's decision failure. It's decision fatigue. So we can do one of two things. We can just buy everything, take everything, and then give up, and we're so exhausted we don't take anything. And then we go round and round and round. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to just talk a little bit about NAD from the perspective of putting everything that we potentially could use to help ourselves into two categories. And those categories are all those things that naturally exist in our bodies, and all the things that are most likely helpful but don't exist in our bodies. So we're talking about molecules that God, evolution, has chosen for us, and then molecules that, for whatever reason, we've determined in modern medicine or science or whatever, are equally important. So I'm always going to lean in on 3 billion years worth of product development as opposed to maybe 10 years worth of product. So as I said, I would like everybody to leave here being able to say, I have a different perspective, and maybe the other topic I'd like for you to take away is the idea that probably the things that we suffer and our demise are typically, in the Western world, heart disease, stroke, cancer, diabetes. And I'd like to make a proposition to you to consider that the etiology of all of those is inflammation. So we're getting to a point in science and medicine in which we're seeing that if we get into the deep root mechanisms of a cell, we don't have to live in the world of for every ill there is a separate pill. So when I tell people, well, NAD has been shown anecdotally to do 3 beneficial things, they believe it. When I tell them 10, they say, oh, it's snake oil. Because we've been brainwashed to believe that for every ill there's a separate pill. So what I'd like for you to consider is that the underlying etiology of the illnesses that we suffer, diabetes, cancer, stroke, heart disease, typically the ones that the insurance companies will say will be our demise, all have a root in inflammation, and the inflammatory, anti-inflammatory molecule, the most important one, is NAD. So everybody's saying, oh, my molecule's better than your molecule, and this is good, and this is better. But at the end of this, I'd really like you to see that NAD is the foundational molecule. It's a foundational molecule for inflammation. And after 50 years old, we're 50% depleted. And so I think we could say the diseases we suffer are really NAD deficiency syndrome. So let's jump right in. Let's go to slide 1. Let's go back to slide 1. Let's open. So just a little disclosure statement. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a company called Molecular Health. We're considered the founders of NAD in the United States. I have created a nano NAD version of which we'll talk about later, but you know, anytime you do speeches and presentations, you always have to have a little disclosure. Okay, next slide, please. So let's just jump into it. So here's what we're going to talk about. What is NAD? What is the role of NAD in the body? The potential benefits of NAD supplementation. And then a little bit about nanotechnology and why we believe that a nano version of NAD is so much more powerful and beneficial. And then talk a little bit about the NAD benefits. Okay, next slide, please. So what is NAD? Now, we're not going to geek out too much, but I just want you to know a little bit about the science. So it's easier to say NAD than its whole formal word, nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide. Now, nicotinamide has nothing to do with nicotine. It's just a structure, a ring structure that has that form of chemistry that has these special names. Now, what exactly is it? It is and has been essential to generating energy for every organism on Earth since the beginning of life 3 billion years ago. Well, what does that mean? Well, what it means is this, that every living thing on Earth, from bacteria to jellyfish to mammals to us, uses NAD as its primary energy source. So I always say product development, 3 billion years. So how ubiquitous is it? But at least 100 of enzymes depend directly on NAD. And if you count downstream processes, you will see that there are thousands of cellular reactions involved in NAD. So, as it says, some researchers describe NAD as being involved in virtually every major biological pathway. So we know that the final pathway for energy is ATP, and NAD is the ingredient to that. And so we can say that really life depends on NAD levels, and NAD levels drop precipitously after 46 years old, and at 50 years old, we're 50% depleted. Next slide, please. So what does NAD do? I like this slide a lot because it gets out of the weeds and it's something really just to remember. And what it is it energizes and it protects. So when people say, what does NAD do? That's what it does. It energizes and protects. And for 100 years, we have known this. We're just learning about this, and this is very important for the protection of anti-inflammatory diseases, cancer, heart disease, stroke, diabetes, and we'll get into that. So just the takeaway messages are NAD energizes and protects. Okay, next slide, please. So how does it energize? Well, all our cells, we need energy to build, communicate, repair, survive. All organs rely on cell energy to function. Now the body has about 30 trillion cells, and every single one of them relies on energy. Now ATP, as I said, adenosine triphosphate, is the final output of NAD, and is the energy currency of every cell in the body. NAD is essential to metabolic and electrical processes, and where does it take place? In the mitochondria. And all of this is converting food into ATP. So basically, a plant goes the other way around. It takes oxygen, converts it into food, CO2 into food, and then we go the other way, we produce ATP. But every plant and every mammal and every animal is using NAD as its primary energy source. So you can see the importance of NAD. Next slide, please. Now let's talk about the protection. I like this a lot because what we're talking about is how NAD can make a huge, major impact in our protection. Because when we talk about wellness, we talk about longevity. I think it's important. If we want to be 100 years old and we want to be healthy, first what we have to do is we have to eliminate. So the Western world is very interested in adding. So I was a philosophy major, and I studied Eastern philosophy. And one of the differences between Western thought and Eastern thought is, in the West, we always, when we something, we always say, oh, I need to add this, add. So if I want to be 100 years old, I need to add a lot of stuff, right? In the East, the question is, what can I remove? So the word guru comes to mind. So guru in Sanskrit means remover of darkness. So if I want wisdom, first I have to remove. So if I want to live to be 100 years old, I have to remove the things that are going to keep me from being 100. I have to remove my cancer risk, I have to remove my coronary risk, and so we're talking about protection. So let's talk about each one of these. So NAD acts as a coenzyme. Well, you don't have to really understand what a coenzyme is, but a coenzyme is just a complex in which it helps the body, or it helps chemical reactions to come together more easily and more quickly. So NAD interacts with other molecules, and it does three things. It does DNA repair. This is very important because DNA repair is the inhibition of mutation, and the cause of all cancers is mutation. Now, every mutation doesn't lead to cancer, but every cancer came from a mutation. So this is very important. NAD is the number one molecule for DNA repair, and so it's the number one molecule for removal of mutations. So really, it's the number one molecule for cancer protection. And we can talk about cancer later on down the line, because many practitioners ask, oh, isn't NAD possibly dangerous if you have cancer? And we can dispel that in the plan. The next one is inflammation protection, and we're all a bag of inflammation. As we get older, whether we live in the Western world, exposed to inflammatory things or not, inflammation is our enemy. And inflammation has to do with coronary artery disease, it has to do with plaques, and it has to do with overall health. So, let's also talk about defense against infectious agents, because that's the other thing that's going to keep us from being 100 years old. We get an infectious disease that either sickens us slowly, chronically, or just kills us all. And also, the second level of defense against cancer is if this system misses out and a cancer cell actually occurs through a mutation, it's also, the NAD is also the second line of defense because it activates the immune system. Next slide, please. Okay, so now let's get a little bit into the science, not too deep, but just so you have an understanding of how exactly it happens. And so you have NAD, and here's the DNA, and here's NAD's friend, PARP, and PARP is just a long-winded word for poly-ADP ribose polymerase. It's a coenzyme. So NAD and PARP combine together to protect DNA from mutations. So PARPs detect DNA damage, and they attach this molecule here, and it initiates a removal of the error and a replacement. So DNA is repaired through NAD and its buddy PARP to protect the DNA, and so on. Next slide, please. Okay, now let's talk about inflammation. Everybody is talking about inflammation. Everybody's talking about free radicals. Everybody's talking about reactive oxygen species. If you look on the back of your granola bars, or you look on the menu, you will see anti-inflammation this, anti-inflammation that, and we realize that inflammation is very important. Now, when I was in medical school, way back when, we believed that heart disease and stroke was proportional just to cerebral vascular plaques stuck in the arterial walls of our heart, or our brain, or in our feet or legs. We said, oh well, cholesterol is proportional to these plaques, and these plaques are proportional to the demise of the organ. Then all of a sudden, we all said, well, everybody has a grandmother or an aunt or something like this who has a sky-high cholesterol level, but somehow they have coronary artery plaques or cerebrovascular plaques non-existent. Now, how is that possible? So I was at the Medical College of Pennsylvania, and there was a group there called the Philadelphia Lipid Group. And what they did was they said, well, maybe we're missing something. And so what they did was they looked at the constituents of these plaques, and they found that it wasn't just cholesterol at all. That there were these immune cells stuck in these plaques, and they named it a foam cell. So now all of a sudden, everybody started saying, well, what are these immune cells doing in a plaque? And we saw that the inflammatory environment produces these inflammatory foam cells. And now we started saying, oh, inflammation has to do with these plaques. And so now it's routine to talk about inflammation being a risk. We talk about getting all these tests like C-reactive proteins and all these other things we can test. And so now it's very common to understand the importance of inflammation. So now how does NAD act as the primary molecule against inflammation? Well, as I said before, it's a coenzyme. So you have this little guy called a sirtuin. And a sirtuin combines with NAD, and what it does is it causes a change in a situation where we're turning off the inflammatory genes. We're getting rid of these things called free radicals and reactive oxygen species that everybody's talking about. You eat blueberries, you eat cranberries, it will reduce these reactive oxygen species. But these are all dependent on this little team here, NAD and sirtuins. Next slide, please. So now let's talk about NAD's other friends. These things called CD36 and CD157 receptors. So now what we're doing is now we're talking about how NAD, in a coenzymatic way with these complexes, protects against anything that's foreign. Anything that is foreign, a T cell specifically, or a B cell, we'll look at it, or natural T killer cells, we'll say, oh, there's something foreign here, I need to kill it. But it needs energy, and it needs to be activated, these cells, these immune cells. And how does that happen? Through these receptors. So this thing here is an immune cell, a T cell, B cell, monocyte, lymphocyte, and it has receptors on it. But these receptors need activation to stimulate the cell to act. And so NAD is absolutely essential. It's an essential coenzyme with CD38 receptors, CD36 too. And so what we have is this. NAD stimulates these cells to look at anything in the body and attack its form. So people ask me, what is the contraindications for NAD? And one of the contraindications for NAD is recent organ transplant or skin graft, because NAD revs up the immune system so well that if the body sees something that it considers foreign, it will attack it. But if you are interested, as we all are, of keeping ourselves free from bacterial infections, parasitic infections, and viral infections, NAD is absolutely essential. Natural T killer cells are the #1 immune system to fight cancer. And so a lot of research is going into how do we rev up natural T killer cells. And the natural way is through NAD. So I'm not saying the chemotherapy is not important, but I'm saying maybe we should look not as an or, but an and. Maybe we should go back to what I'm calling biomolecular medicine, in which let's focus on supplementing the things that we already have, as opposed to reaching out, having a deficit of what we already have, and reaching out to other pharmaceutically developed molecules, and not really focusing on revving up what we already have. I'm going to lean in on 3 billion years worth of evolution versus 20 years of evolution of update pharmaceutical. Next slide, please. So, a natural decline of NAD. So, after 46 years old, our NAD levels drop precipitously. They start dropping at birth, but at 46, it goes off a cliff. And of course, anything that leads to the need for NAD, chronic diseases, autoimmune-inflammatory diseases, MS, Parkinson's, chewing up NAD, is going to make the decline decline steeper. And of course, living in the Western world with Wi-Fi and toxic mold, using up NAD just to survive and so forth, it's even worse. So after 46 years old, NAD levels drop precipitously. After 50, we're 50% depleted. And so, of course, we're at increased risk for all these diseases that NAD is protecting. Next slide, please. So what are the other ways we can add to NAD levels? Well, intermittent fasting will increase NAD. Exercise will increase NAD. Sleep, very important. Cold exposure, decreasing your alcohol, and decreasing your caffeine, because caffeine will block the metabolite of NAD. I know many people are loath to hear that. My marketing people say, no, get rid of that. This is not good. But I'm a doctor first, I'm not kidding. Excellent. Okay, so this is just a summary of now what exactly is NAD going to do for us. We've got all the science, all this stuff with HARPs and CERTs and all these other long-winded words. What difference does it make if we don't know how it's going to help us? So, enhances mental clarity, vitality, physical energy endurance, muscle strength and recovery, immune functions, we said, with our combination with the CD38, reduce chronic inflammation, premature aging, and improve mood. It does a lot. Why? Because it's getting into the mechanism of the cell's energy. Next slide, please. So now let's talk about nanotechnology. So I have an international patent pending on nano. We really think that nanoing NAD makes a tremendous difference in the clinical outcome. We are starting to do pilot studies on this for various different clinical benefits. But I'd like to just share with you what we're talking about right now. So what is a nanoparticle? What is nano? So everybody's talking about nanotechnology, nano this, nano that. Well, the definition of a nanoparticle is anything that's below 100 nanometers. So that's very, very small. So molecules are measured in nanometers. 1 nanometer is 1 billionth of a meter. So now what would that be? Well, the head of a pin is about 500 million nanometers across. So you can see it's very, very small. So nearly 500 million molecules of NAD are equivalent to the head of a pin. Okay, next slide, please. So why do it at all? What's the whole point? Well, why even do anything with that? So what does it do? So sometimes a particle of a medicine or a treatment is a single molecule, but sometimes it's just a clump of molecules. So in its raw form, NAD comes as a mixture of the two. Clumped up big, so it doesn't sit down on the receptor, and then naturally occurring small, but a very small percentage. So our technology really separates all these molecules. It doesn't damage the DNA, so they're all universally dispersed. So if you have a tiny molecule, it'll fit in the receptor better, longer, it'll go through the pores, all that, and you'll get an improved benefit. Next slide, please. So this is just a diagram proving that we're not just saying it, but actually it's the case. So what this is the on the x-axis is the diameter of the molecule. And this is the volume. So if you look in ChatGPT or something else, you'll ask, what is the size of an NAD molecule as opposed to a clumped up group? And one molecule has a diameter of 1.92, okay? Well, look here. All our molecules, see that? 100% of the molecules are 1.92. So 100% of all the NAD in our solution is 1.92, showing every darn one of these fellows has been separated out. Now this is what we call naked nano. There are other kinds of nanotechnology in which you'll coat the particle. You'll put it in a metal on it or something like that. We would never want to do that because who would want a heavy metal going through your blood-brain barrier, right? Next slide, please. So this is just a little quote from a very famous person named Ross Grant. We're honored to have him on our scientific advisory board as our chairman. He's considered the #1 researcher in the world for NAD. He's written more about NAD than ever alive. Very nice man, lives in Sydney, Australia. And so he says, why nano-optimize NAD? It is evident that the nano process has resulted in a very fine dispersion, as I said, of NAD throughout the solution to what may roughly equate to its particle size. This level of dispersion should result in significant increase in NAD to cellular interaction, facilitating not only its uptake and distribution, but also NAD reactivity at the molecular level. So that's how a scientist says it makes a difference. Next slide, please. So, why nano-optimize? So, it's more easily dissolved in the blood and more readily absorbed in the skin. It allows for a greater concentration of NAD to be placed into a dose. So, for example, many people are now taking sub-Q NAD. So instead of taking something like 50 milligrams or 100 milligrams, you can take 200 milligrams, and there's less that you have to put in this solution. So we believe that nanotechnology is the new frontier of quality NAD supplementation. Next slide, please. So, NAD can be formulated in topical solutions and creams. It's not currently approved by the FDA, but that's what we're working on. It is licensed physicians like me and others can use it for off-label, elective, adjunctive therapy. It's not considered a substitute for indicated medications, but it's a tremendous addition. So how do we do it? We do it with IV, we do it with home injections or nasal spray. It can be used topically. It's great for pain, topically for medical conditions, and as a part of a preventative medicine package, but only on prescription for IVs and nasal sprays. Topical is not a prescription. So depending on the prescribed dose and individual tolerance, an IV solution may take between 1 to 4 hours. Multiple sessions are recommended. Next slide, please. So here are the NAD therapies. So IV therapy on prescription only. We consider it the gold standard for certain types of disorders. It delivers NAD to the cell more directly and at a higher dose. It's really an ultimate whole body supplementation. It can be indicated as a part of a treatment for substance abuse, also for autoimmune diseases and neurodegenerative diseases. We use it for Parkinson's. We use it for MS with tremendous benefit. And potential to provide all potential benefits of NAD supplementation. It's the gold standard for not only disease, but also for overall wellness, longevity. Next slide, please. So now we have subcutaneous also. I actually use it every day, it's easy, it's convenient. When it's nano, the concentration is higher, so you don't put as much solution in, so you don't get welt. The same indications as IV therapy plus. It may be indicated for increased energy, pain reduction, improved cognitive function, anxiety management. It works for anxiety because anxiety is really a stimulus for cortisol. We all know that anxious thoughts produce a spike in cortisol. Cortisol is a major inflammatory molecule. And when you have an inflamed brain, you have an anxious brain. So in that way, we see inflammation is the cause of anxiety. And so NAD, being in the #1 anti-inflammatory molecule, it cuts anxiety. So it has the potential to provide all potential benefits of NAD supplementation proportional to dose. Next slide, please. So also nasal spray. It's on prescription only. We use it for anxiety, we use it for energy, for cognitive clarity, and it's indicated for energy and cognition, and also anxiety management. And I've had patients, I'm a clinical psychiatrist, and I've had many patients come off of their benzodiazepines, which we don't like, Ativan, Klonopin, Valium, Xanax, all addictive, and we've also had patients come off of their Adderall and their AD medicine. So we like that a lot. Next slide, please. So, coming soon, we have a cream. We also, right now, have a topical solution. We use that for diabetic peripheral neuropathic pain. We use it for chemotherapeutic pain. And we also use it for just musculoskeletal pain. So the topical solution is great. And we also have a cream under development. And that's very important because the reason why we have wrinkles is not sun accumulation. We have wrinkles is because we have a separation from the dermis and the epidermis. And the reason we have a separation is because collagen is no longer sticking those things together because fibroblasts, which is the cell that produces collagen, under the influence of sun without any protection, now starts making a complex called the metalloproteinine that actually destroys the very collagen that it should be making. So the notion of eating collagen with the notion of putting high collagen cream on really doesn't make much sense after 46 years old, because every single piece of collagen you're putting on, the sun is stimulating the fibroblasts to make this enzyme to destroy the collagen. So we're happy about the cream development, and that's coming soon. But we have topical, and it works very well for all the different types of musculoskeletal and peripheral neuropathic pain. Next slide, please. So the solution, IV solution, is 200 milligrams. As I said, it provides all the other benefits of NAD, and it can be administered in a physician's office or in a home supervision state. And our pharmacy here in Florida is Precision Pharma in Jupiter. I've been looking for a pharmacy like this in Florida for about 2.5 years, and we're very excited. Precision Pharma, we have tremendous confidence in them, and they are the people here that we're using for IV NAD and sub-Q and nasal. Also, House Call, the app. My good friend Rose started House Call, the app. More living rooms, less waiting rooms, a situation in which you can just call and you can get any IV solution, not just NAD, but others, and other care in your home. It's a tremendous benefit. So we are combining these two very fantastic companies. Next slide, please. So subcutaneous from Precision Pharma. As I said, I take it. Also Shady Grove in Maryland. And we see a lot of benefits on daily sub-Q, and some people take it a couple times a week depending on their needs. Next slide, please. Nasal spray, as I said, it can be 300 or 400 milligrams, and with immediate acting, energy, brain fog, and anxiety. Also, home prescription. Next slide, please. So, that's really what we're all about at every level. Reaching our maximum capacity if we're recovering, reaching our maximum capacity if we're recovering from illness, staying fit, reaching our maximum capacity. Next slide. Coming soon, 3. Questions? Yes.
Some of the articles I've read talk about precursors and all kinds of
Precursors.
So, how do we know which one to choose?
Good question. It goes back to the original goal of this. How do we make some decisions? There are precursors out there, and we don't want to bash any companies, but we are interested in science, more than marketing, we just don't see any clinical beneficial trials showing that precursors work. Most of them are oral, almost all of them are oral, and these molecules are very large, whether liposome or not. They're going to have a tendency to be destroyed by acid in the stomach, and if not, they'll go through what's called first pass in the liver, and the liver has 2,000 mitochondrial cells in it, and so we really like to just go with NAD. So the very first person in the United States that was involved with NAD is a man named Dick Medier, and he's been doing this for over 15 years, and he's seen so much benefit with NAD. I've been involved with this since 1979, so we just like to go to the root of it. But yes, the key is not to be fooled by science fiction, but science fact. And we love so much the benefit of NAD. And you see the theme here is IV, sub-Q, nasal, everything but oral. So there's a thing called the celebritization of science, where all these scientists are becoming celebrities. That's not so bad. The bad thing is when celebrities become scientists. That's the thing. And so I think it's probably better to get your scientific information from doctors and literature as opposed to your favorite influencer. And so I think the key to choosing is to go with the science and think, does that make any sense? Excellent question. Anybody else? Yes?
What are your thoughts on all the oral liposomal
That's a good question. I haven't seen much in the literature showing even anecdotal benefits. Probably for some people it may work. Maybe a swish and swallow could work. But taking an oral, if it gets through the stomach, I think the liver may be destroying it. Especially because NAD is going right to the mitochondria, and the liver cell has 2,000 mitochondria in every single cell.
What are your thoughts on not being sick cold?
Very, very important, yes. NAD is a very complex molecule. If you go back and you look at the very first picture, it's this giant thing, giant molecule, and it absolutely needs to stay cold. So if you go into a store, you go in GNC or something like this, you see a bottle of NAD on the shelf and it's not in the refrigerator, well, that tells you. The enemies of NAD is time, light, and oxygen, and pH. So unfortunately, it does have to stay cold. Good question. Good question. There are side effects. So one of the benefits of NAD, people don't really realize it, is that it converts to a molecule called adenosine. And adenosine, if it's too high, what will happen is you'll get a pulmonary engorgement. So adenosine sits down the receptors in the lung and it stimulates a vasodilation. And so you start getting a heavy feeling in your chest. You say, oh my God, am I having a heart attack? No, you're really just getting a lot more blood into your lungs. If you take a very high dose, you're going to get sort of a catecholamine reaction, meaning an anxious feeling like this. So that goes back to the whole point of you really need to get a physician or a highly trained nurse practitioner to be giving your IVs. Probably not firemen, probably not paramedics. We love firemen and paramedics, but not acting as doctors. So that would be the only side effect. The other is you wouldn't want to take it if you've had an organ transplant, and you wouldn't want to take it if you had active atrial fibrillation. But the side effects, you're all right. The other question is, if you take supplemental NAD, will my NAD keep my body from making its own? It will not, because it's not a hormone, so there's no feedback to slow it down. Other questions? No? All right. And thank you for your time. I hope you'll consider NAD as a, yes? do with drug use. It has to do with drug use. And also, where you're getting your NAD from is very important. We're very concerned about what kind of gas that we put in our cars, but maybe we're less concerned about what we put in our bodies. I would be very careful looking at where you're getting the source from. We are very, very careful where we get our source from. I would stay away from very inexpensive Chinese versions of NAD. If you see a vial of NAD and it is not in an amber bottle, well, that tells you that your compounding pharmacy doesn't know what they're doing, because light will destroy the molecule. So be as conscientious, or hopefully more conscientious, about where you're getting your NAD as you are what you're putting in your car. You probably wouldn't go if your heart surgeon said your daughter needs a heart valve. You probably wouldn't say, oh, let's get on Alibaba and choose the cheapest heart valve we can find. So likewise, I would not use cheapness as a top priority for any medical product concerned about NAD. I would ask for a physician that has some knowledge of it. They can certainly reach out to me. It doesn't take too much to learn how to do it, but the physician should have some background in doing it, and it's also helpful to get lab tests, because then you can see how beneficial it is pre and post. Unfortunately, we do not have a lab test right now for NAD. There are things out there called Genfinity that purport to be a lab test. It doesn't happen. There are lab tests, but you'd have to get it sent to the lab within 4 hours, and the only lab I know is in Sydney, Australia. So right now it's impossible. But any physician should probably reach out to Precision Pharma, or they can certainly reach out to me. But more and more physicians are becoming highly trained in this, and I think it's going to be, it will be absolutely transformative. You certainly can. Yes. Yes. Right. Yes. I have an office in Hobe Sound. Yes. So maybe I should just sit here. I love it. I'm a yoga guy. I remember doing lectures years ago, and I started a lecture at 8 o'clock in the morning, and I just kept on doing circling. Here's what it is. NAD does two things. It energizes and it protects. And the way it protects is it acts coenzymatically with other molecules, certain kinds of molecules. And what they do is they destroy the cause of inflammation. The cause of inflammation are these things called free radicals and reactive oxygen species. We're all hearing about it. Oxidative stress. So what it does is, the way it does it is that NAD with a molecule called sirtuin produces another long-winded word called superoxide dismutase, anything with ASE is an enzyme, and that destroys those free radicals. So NAD is the #1 anti-inflammatory molecule in that direction. And another very good anti-inflammatory molecule is called glutathione. We've all heard of that. And the reason why you need NAD for glutathione is because glutathione has to be in a certain form, and the only way that's going to happen is through NAD. Now, if you're less than 46 years old and you don't have an inflammatory environment in your body or around you, you will probably have enough NAD. So you'll have enough natural NAD to produce the glutathione. But long and short of it is, the diseases that we suffer, stroke, heart attack, cancer, diabetes, they all have their DICE, they all have their etiology of inflammation. And NAD is the #1 anti-inflammatory molecule. So I'm bold enough to say that the diseases we're suffering are really NAD deficiency symptoms. Any other questions? Well, I thank you very much. I ask you to consider NAD. I ask you to consider looking at all those molecules that already exist in your body. There's probably 3 billion years worth of evolution